So many people are now learning that the way that we have been teaching for quite some time has been from a position of you have to study to learn. And so what you have to teach a child is to discover from within itself what it already knows. And whatever it needs, it has to go into that state of knowing that it knows, do a little bit of research, do a little bit of study to guide you into the vocabulary, to the structure. And then the lens of that vocabulary and structure will put into perspective all of the raw data, all of that information that you're drawing in. And now, instead of just reading and learning what somebody else has discovered, you're actually experiencing the joy of discovering it for yourself. When you inspire your children to research, to follow their investigative curiosity, this is truly the gift that you can teach them. Because then through their investigative curiosity, they will begin to build their vocabulary, build their knowledge base. They will begin to have new ideas. They will begin to formulate concepts, construct their sense of imagine solutions to situations that are causing challenges in their own life or challenges in life itself. And when you ignite a child with that ability, now you've ignited a master. And that master will then proceed into the world and have a tool that can serve them throughout their lives. If you teach a child how to research, then you create what are called responsible children. A child that has the ability to respond. And so a responsible child is a child that has the ability to respond to its circumstances. You're teaching them to be confident. You're teaching them to walk through their life with faith, to navigate all of the situations that may arise, and to know that they know and know how to research so that they can gather the information to be applied to the circumstance. This is giving a child the ability to be successful regardless of their circumstance.
Welcome to the Awakening Entrepreneur Podcast. This show is for entrepreneurs that have chosen to define their life beyond the material. They have followed their soul on a hero's journey towards the mystery of the spiritual. I'm your host, Garrett Ng. Each episode will be learning from awakened entrepreneurs and spiritual thought leaders. They have broken through the mold of being ordinary to extraordinary, challenging our paradigm, shining light to the dark, giving hope when there is doubt. The moment of truth is upon us. It is time to transcend our world from fear to love. Are you ready? Let's go! Welcome to this week Awakening Entrepreneur Podcast. Do we have an amazing guest for you today? I've known this gentleman, this guru, for quite a few years now, and I've been gifted with this book, Buried Treasure. It wasn't until that I was planning to do a podcast, and again, some of the best podcasts, it's just completely intuition. The intuition, like I knew this gentleman for quite some time, but until it is time, the intuition didn't say, hey, go and reach out. But when it reached out and he agreed to say yes, and I was so excited. I thought I'll do some homework prior to the call. And then reading the book is called Buried Treasure. It's been sitting in my bookshelf for quite a few years. And some of you guys know that I've got narcolepsy, which means I'll just fall asleep, especially reading a book. My whole high school, university days, I did all the study in bed, 2 pages in and I'm conked out. So to read a book from pages to pages, from book cover to book end is a big deal. And this book did the trick. It was hard at the beginning, but then when I got the momentum, I just didn't want to put the book down. Like, so you guys, I'm going to put the link on the show notes on how you guys can get it, but get this book. We're going to talk more about the book and outside of the book, but this gentleman is Mr. Guru Singh. I knew him prior to the book as very wise yogi, always full of wisdom, but at the same time, cracking jokes left, right, and center. You just wouldn't expect someone with the turban on, dressed like in the Sikh clothing, very white, and to be like a walking comedian. And at the same time, he's so down to earth and relatable and so friendly, kind, loving that when you're with him, he wouldn't give you the aura that he is above you. He is just your friend. And I love him dearly and his whole family. And I really miss connecting with him, not being in the same country. But I'm really excited we got him on this chat now. So welcome, Satnam Guru Singh.
How are you?
Good, Guru Singh. Yeah, I was just chatting to you before. Prior to the last time we connected, it was before I started this awakening, which I didn't even know about. And I started feeling energy in the head, and then like bulging energy becoming bigger and bigger. And every time I meditated, it just boom, 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 boom. Like I meditated the midbrain, it just became bigger because I was thinking that personal development, it requires logic. But most of the time when I'm getting triggered, it's my reptilian brain. So when I Googled, I found something like that says Kundalini awakening, spiritual awakening. It's the first time in 41 years I've ever heard that term. And then you're the first person I actually reached out. Guru Singh, what is happening?
You know, it's a beautiful opportunity when a dear friend has a moment of awakening and they are in need of a little bit of guidance, as you say, because so much of our lives are consumed by logic. And there's the yin and the yang. Yang is the logic. The yin is that feminine magic. I call it magic. Is that unknown, that unseen. And what you're describing is one of the gentle awakenings of that Kundalini energy, which gives you a greater perspective. As a matter of fact, you have two nervous systems. You have the sympathetic and you have the parasympathetic. The sympathetic is what keeps you alive, the act and react. The parasympathetic is when it is introduced to you, it builds your consciousness. And when you raise that Kundalini energy, it begins to also activate what's called the vagus nerve in the front of your body that descends from the brain down through your body, down into the groin area, which then connects with that Kundalini. And it forms this continuing process, this continuing cycling of the orbit. This is what you were experiencing, because as it cycles like this, it makes it feel like it's expanding out. And that's one of the reasons why they would always say, I'm expanding my consciousness, because it literally feels like you're just getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Oh, wow. So thank you for that, Guru Singh. Before we get into the book, I wanted to highlight some of the information that my false assumption about how your wisdom came about. I just thought that, you know what, you came up from a lineage of yogis, your parents, your grandparents, if I'm correct, you're the third generation yogis, and they just taught you a whole bunch of wisdom. You didn't have to go through much traumatic upbringing or eventful upbringing from your childhood to your teens and everything. You just, like very Zen-like, and you just accumulate wisdom from books and teachers or whatnot. And holy moly, was I very limited in my thinking. So what was your childhood upbringing like, Guru Singh?
Well, my childhood was, I was raised in a family that was a yogic family. They meditated. We did all of these things like it would be done in India, because my grandparents' generation, my great aunt, she was a student of Sri Yukteswar, who was Nanda's guru. He was Yogananda's teacher. And my great aunt was attached, connected to Yogananda, and sent with him from India to America and served him throughout his life. And so my childhood growing up was kind of the reverse of other people's childhood. Many people would have chaos at home and they would find sanctuary amongst their friends. In my world growing up, I had sanctuary at home. I had great friendships, But the world at large was very chaotic to me. And so I found myself much more inclined to be in a meditative state. For example, when I was in elementary school, I would daydream a lot. And in my daydreaming, I recognized that what it was that the school wanted me to do, I could get done in a split second almost, because it was very easy to understand the subject and to gather the information of the subject and to present it. And I found that what people were trying to do is they explain to the children that they didn't know anything, they needed to see it. And my whole lineage had taught me that I knew everything, I just needed to apply it. And it's a different attitude. And that attitude is based in what's called confidence. And fidens means faith in French. And so confidence means with faith. So I would go into school and I would just know that I knew, and it would come through me, and I would write down the answers. And so my childhood growing up was a childhood that understood that there was a great deal of chaos and disorder in the world, but that there was also this world that was just brimming with knowledge and information. And it was a world that was so phenomenal. The home was a temple and a great sanctuary there. The world at large was very, my friends were beautiful, but the world they were trying to teach was, very obscure. So as I grew up, I determined that I wanted to be a teacher that would overcome these things so that people could really understand that they were a remarkable creature that had all this intelligence and access to all this wisdom.
Wow.
I relate it to the computer age. Let's just say you have a Chromebook. You have a Google Chromebook, which basically has no information on the book itself. It just has access to the internet. That's kind of human being is. I mean, we have limited information, just like the Chromebook does. It has programs, etc. We have limited information within ourselves, but the universe has all of the information. And so if we just figure out how we can connect our internal human Wi-Fi to the internet, which is through our meditations, then we are able to access all the knowledge, all the wisdom like that.
Wow. And I know that you've got concrete stories that actually back it up. So we'll go through that a bit later. So do you actually study while you were at school? Or you just kept downloading?
No. Yeah, you had to read some specifics because you had to get the dates right and the names right and all that. And everything else was just a download. As a matter of fact, I just thought school was the greatest thing because they get all your friends and put them into one room and keep you there all day long, right?
Wow, man. Like I started getting my kids to do special ESP training. They've got the blindfold on and they can read and they can see with the blindfold on. And I thought seeing is believing. Like that gave me, like, no matter how many times I see it, my jaws is still completely dropped every time I see that happen. But what you described to me is to a whole new level of really challenging what our belief system of our human potential.
Oh, yeah. And that is what we are dealing with, a critical moment in human history in which human beings are no longer willing to be enslaved in the thought that they are ignorant. And it's really igniting the younger generation. And there is an opportunity for the human being to take the crisis of the global pandemic, to take the crisis of the bigotry and the nationalism and all of these very backward kinds of governments, and recognize that every crisis has the opportunity for growth, and that evolution uses crises to stimulate growth. And so I look at what we're doing here in this world right now as being basically the fuel for what people like yourself and myself and others can use to grow this world into its super consciousness.
Wow, that's beautiful. So I guess like growing up, you've had pretty chaotic outside, but then internally you've been pretty calm. Do you want to like, was the next major event, was it what you described in the book, like having the NDE, the near-death experiences? Was that kind of the major shift in your trajectory?
Yeah, I would say that the idea of violence, because at that time there was the Vietnam War, and I was in no way, shape, or form going to become a violent being. So, therefore, as I developed my sense of adulthood, because I had graduated from school, I was attending college, I was a musician playing in, giving concerts around my local area. And there was always this dichotomy. I really didn't think I needed any more school because it wasn't giving me what I felt was necessary. And so at that time, that's when I had a ruptured appendix. And even though it sounds very odd for a person to say this, well, maybe not so much. I guess many people will say that was a gift. And it was. This ruptured appendix, this medical crisis, was a gift. And from that crisis, I died for a minute and 45 seconds while they were trying to revive me with defibrillator paddles. And it was in that death experience that in leaving my body and experiencing what was beyond the physical, I came to understand that even the life that I was living, which was in my thoughts, a life of significant calm and significant consciousness and intelligence, kindness, and all of those wonderful attributes, one would say, there was something that was clearly missing. And this is when I was met on the other side of the physical world by some great guides who challenged me and said to me, I'm in death, the heart's not beating, I'm not breathing, they're trying to revive me. And I'm out there in the cosmos being schooled by some incredible guides. And they're telling me that I'm a failure. If I don't put myself forward in a much greater way, that I'm not myself, I'm an imposter. And I was given this life, and this wasn't about me. This was about every human being. And that's why I'm not making it a personal thing. They were basically telling me that every human life is a gift with unlimited potential, and that it is up to the human being to not play it safe, which they've clearly showed me that I had been, even though my safety was quite different than everyone else's, and that you needed to exert in a way that was able to achieve your wildest imagination and your greatest dreams. And every single one of us has that wild imagination and those great dreams. And maybe we had them as a child and cut them off because life became very burdensome. Or maybe we've kept them alive and they torment us because we're not achieving them. And so what I did was, when I came back into life, I made it very clear. I mean, it wasn't easy, but when I came back into life in the hospital, I made it very clear that I was not going to take any more of the easier path. I was going to pursue the dreams that are deep inside of me. We have a great friend, a mutual friend in Tony and Sage. And, he has the same attitude. Ever since I've known you, I've known that you have that same attitude. Each one of us, in our own different ways, have this attitude. Every entrepreneur has this attitude that I can do this, even though I'm not working for someone. I'm not doing something that everybody else knows how to do. I may be doing something that I don't even know how to do, but I'm going to learn it as it unfolds. That's the spirit. And I was gifted that spirit at that age, and by my experience of dying in a hospital. And the end result was that the rest of my life became a continuous unfolding of that effort. And what a better thing to do in living your life is to continually unfold your dream.
Wow. So this is, guys, if you're listening and you thought this is interesting, this is just the very start of the story. It's almost like within the first chapter. And then the journey continues, like how wrong of my assumption that having the Zen life, you then obviously become a musician and a mega star performing on some of the biggest stages in the States, along some of the really famous musicians as well. But then the FBI is hunting for you. I would never had imagined that in my whole life.
Yes, we not only decided that we were not, myself and my friends, that we were not going to go into the Vietnam War, but that we were going to rescue the unknowing soldiers from their, their disastrous destiny. So we set up a network of being able to bring soldiers out of the army and get them into Canada, because Canada was a great sanctuary at that time. So the FBI knew that my music was completely anti-war, and that some of my close friends, because they knew who they were suddenly disappearing out of the army. And so, first of all, they went to Warner Brothers Records and asked Warner Brothers to stop publishing my music. And Warner Brothers looked at them and said, why would we do that? He's selling records. Why would we want to just throw away something of our music that is working? And so then the FBI went to the radio stations and said, you have to stop playing his music. And while the radio stations were bound by federal law, they had to abide by that. And so what happened was that Warner Brothers came to me and said, okay, my name at that time was Jerry Pond. They said, okay, Jerry, we're going to need you to change your words, change the lyrics. And so I tried to do that, but you're not going to change your mission, your passion, right? I wasn't just wanting to be a singer. I was wanting to change the world, like you want to change the world, like many of your listeners and viewers want to change the world. I mean, we want to change the world with our mission, with our passion. And if somebody comes to you and says, well, you can have that mission and have that passion, as long as you don't change the world, that's fine. You'd go, well, that doesn't make any sense to me. So what ended up happening is that I ended up moving from being on these big stages with all my friends and all of these various bands to a whole nother chapter in my life, which was in way in the outback of Mexico and you're from Australia, with some native Mexicans, very much like the Aboriginals, who had deep history in serious magic. And, I'm talking about people that had the ability of intuition that wasn't just kind of accurate, it was like spot on accurate. And they were able to, truly magical. They were even able to master the third and fourth dimension. And if you read Yogananda's book, you recognize that his teacher, Sri Yukteswar, could be in two locations at once. He could travel between locations in a matter of moments. There's British Army journals talking about the Australian Aborigines being able to travel faster than physically traveling, and that they could travel with their physical bodies. For example, back in the late 1800s, there's some of these stories of these army generals, and they would ride into these Aboriginal villages and they would discuss things with them. They were trying to keep them subdued, right? They were trying to keep them under control. And then they would go on to the next village, which was maybe 2 days ride from the first village. And the people that they had just left in the first village were already in the second village, talking to the villagers and warning them that the army was about to come. And this is the ability that a human being has when they're not completely disrupted by all of the three-dimensional limitations. And that's not the ability that I'm trying to teach in this world. I'm trying to teach people, and I am not trying to. I am teaching people in this world not necessarily how to bilocate or to travel through time. I'm teaching people how they can use time and use space to serve their mission and to serve their purpose.
Wow. So we'll go into that a bit deeper. From some of my studies of late, I've been learning that some of the ancient civilizations, the lost worlds, and they communicate via telepathic, and they all kind of
Yes,
like the bees and the ants and all work off the hive mind and communication. We all share the same information, so it's not like he knew something that I didn't, and that's kind
that's exactly what that, by the way, just to interject, that is exactly why I use the metaphor of the Chromebook accessing the universal mind, right? Because that's exactly what you're describing.
yeah. So I heard it from different sources, but you were the first person that I actually knew. Not just I met someone that can telepathically communicate or read minds, but a whole tribe of people, a whole civilization of people that is, again, like some people may be skeptical. I think most of the audience that's listening to this like would like, yeah, like I guess it, but still, like, to me, this is a big proof that the whole human potential of what we're capable is not as far-fetched or as distant as what we may seem. Like, who knows, maybe we could fly, we could do all different things that the movie shows, because kind of a lot of the movies are kind of premonitions to what is about to happen anyway.
Yeah, imagine living in the 1400s and 1500s in that time. Imagine living in the time of Leonardo da Vinci. And Leonardo da Vinci is drawing these pictures, which are today, in museum. He's drawing pictures of airplanes. He's drawing pictures of submarines. He's drawing pictures of these things that are in his imagination, all of which have been invented. And then you go with Arthur C. Clarke, one of my heroes, right? And he writes 2001 Space Odyssey. And every single thing, he wrote that 40 years ago. Every single thing in that book has come true except for one thing, and that was the space elevator, right? These are the ways in which we as human beings grow. First we imagine, and then we document, and then we invent, and then we step into it. It's what Einstein said, today's imagination is tomorrow's reality. And what is our imagination? It's our projection from what we know into what we don't know. And that's what all growth is. All growth is moving from what you already know into what you don't know. And that's why in growth, you've got to be willing to make a lot of mistakes. Because if you're doing something that you don't know how to do, you've got to make a lot of mistakes in order to learn how to do it. And the same thing is true with intuition. The same thing is true with all of these capacities, is that we are going to make mistakes. You're going to think, this is my intuition, and then you're going to realize, no, it was just a stupid thought. But you have to trust that stupid thought, find out that it's wrong, and then forgive yourself, which means to give yourself forward from some event in the past, so that you don't stay stuck in that mistake, that you move forward, you move on.
So let me ask you, like, even though like you grew up in a spiritual family and you've downloading information at school, and you probably have a lot of different experience probably with spirits, and you had the NDE as well, the near-death experiences, but still like meeting this tribe, like as I read it in the book, it's still like, whoa, like it's a big deal of really some of the abilities, not just abilities, but the love, the compassion, and the way that they live is just so different.
Yeah, there are many tribes in the world that have not been drawn into the industrial age or the information age. And these are the tribes that live way back in, New Guinea. They live in South America. They live in Mexico. They live in areas of the world that have not been dominated by the encroachment of the industrial world. And they are holding on to the magic, which was very common to everyone 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, 3,000, 5,000 years ago, back in the time, not so much in the European area, because in the European area they were struggling over survival, but more in the areas of the world where survival was easier, areas where food grew abundantly. And these are the areas where people actually had time on their hands rather than struggle in their life. And because they had time on their hands, in those thousands and thousands of years ago, they would explore their consciousness and they would try things in different ways, and they would discover opportunities amongst these various ways. Many indigenous communities, the Native Americans, as you can see, I have a great influence of Native Mexican and Native American on the walls behind me. Many Native Americans, I love the Aboriginals because they had a great magic. I love the indigenous peoples of the Chinese area, the Mongolian area, the Siberian area, the Tibetan area, the India area, all of these, the African area, the Australian area, all of these areas of the world that had these incredibly magical cultures. And that's been wiped out because of colonization and industrialization. But those that remain, they hold a seed of precious consciousness. It's like in today's world, there are people in today's world where there's so much mass production in agriculture that are preserving heritage seeds of plants that are the original of the original of the original, no hybridization. This is the same thing in consciousness that we must do. We must preserve those heritage seeds of consciousness. And that's what I feel your pursuit is unfolding, my pursuit is unfolding, is that we are discovering and preserving the contents of those heritage seeds of consciousness, in which the human being has the capacity of truly being humane. The human being, even the word human, in Sanskrit, man means mind and hu means light. And so the word human being means the being with light in the mind. And light in the mind is the light actually of the Kundalini, because the Kundalini is a light force. And in the body is made up of 70% water. And within that water are countless, millions, billions, trillions of nanoscopic crystals. And these are saline, salt crystals, sugar crystals, glucose crystals, protein crystals, all of these crystals. These crystals are light absorbing. And this is how the body communicates at the speed of light. And so when you do the yoga postures, when you do the Qigong, when you do the Tai Chi, when you do the various forms, when you swim, when you hike, when you bicycle, when you run, when you do the things that get your energy moving, that's when the fluids of your body can become refreshed. And what we do in Kundalini Yoga, and what I learned also from the exercises that we did within that indigenous community in Mexico, is that basically you're aligning your body so that the crystals and the circulation of the fluids, the blood, the lymph, the cerebral spinal fluid, all the major fluids of your body, these crystals capture the light of the Kundalini energy and they shine it up into your consciousness, which gives you the awareness. It's like being in a dark room and somebody lights a candle and all of a sudden you can see what's in the room from that little candle. Everybody gets to see it. That's what this life has the potential of revealing.
Wow. And I want to quote a sentence from the book. I guess the tribe that you went to visit, they were saying to you, your connection with the spirits is not fully awake. You're very much awake to the needs of your body, thoughts, and emotion. And this is a good start. And it goes on to say, doubts, fear, and anger were gifts from God to help us focus the mind, but we only supposed to use them sparingly. Do you want to talk us through a bit more about that? Like, because you were pretty enlightened, awakened compared to the rest of us, even at that young age. But they basically say you're not awake yet. You're only awake to the needs of the body, thoughts, and emotions.
Yes.
There's more to do.
And they were very stimulating to me. I couldn't rely on my already awakened condition. They were always prodding me to become more and more. So the idea of anger and frustration and jealousy and doubt and fear and all of these, which some people call negative emotions, these are stimulants, very much like salt on your food. And they must be used sparingly, because if you use too much doubt, it's going to suffocate you. But if you use just a little doubt, it stimulates you. If you use just a little bit of fear, it opens your awareness. It's like a deer. If a deer is a little bit of fear, it's alert and it's awake and it's checking things out. Too much fear is called a deer in headlights. It's overwhelmed by the fear and it doesn't move, it freezes. And so the ability to use these emotions is what I was being taught. The need to awaken, let's address that. The needs of the body, this is one of the reasons why we do yoga before we sit and meditate, because otherwise the body will have needs to move, it'll be uncomfortable, and it'll disrupt your meditation. And so we could do a good yoga set and then we meditate, because that gets the body in circulation, that gets the body in flexibility, it gets all of the body, all the kinks are worked out, and then you're comfortable to sit and meditate. And what they were describing to me, that I'm responding to the needs of my physical body, my emotional body, and my mental body. Well, the emotional body arises out of the physical body. The emotional body is created by the proteins, peptides, hormones, and lipids that are produced by the muscles, the bones, the glands, and the organs, and the nerves of your physical body. And then when these proteins, peptides, hormones, and lipids are secreted into your bloodstream, then your bloodstream is analyzed by the brain center, and it goes, oh, you're afraid, or oh, you're this, or oh, you're that. It tells you the feeling that you are to feel, and it happens very rapidly. What if you had the ability to override the emotions that you feel, but not deny them? In other words, you allow your emotions to rise up, but you don't then just languish in them. You don't just fester in them. You notice them, they deliver their message, you put them aside, and then you work with your conscious awareness. That's what they were teaching me, that you have to be so awake that you can see the emotions, you can see the needs of your body, you can see the demands of your mind, but you can also see beyond that and around that, so that this doesn't just dominate you. Most people are just dominated by the needs of their physical body, their emotional body, and their mental body. And so consequently, they spend their life serving these three masters, like a slave, like a servant, serving the masters of the physical body, the emotional body, and the mental body, always trying to find something more exciting, something more delicious, something more this, something more that, always trying to find and serve these three masters. But what if you didn't desert the masters, but that you served them to the degree that they needed to be served, so that you're physically healthy, emotionally happy, and mentally wise? And then you go even beyond that to realize that not only do you have this physical body, but you've got this cosmic connection that can be even more phenomenal than the experiences of this physical world. Don't deny the physical world. Don't deny the emotional world. Don't deny the mental world. Have joy, have pleasure, have family, have work, have career, create, but also know how to do all of those things with a greater ease. That's the cosmic awareness. That's the awakening they were talking about.
Yeah. And I think in my own personal journey and talking to other awakening entrepreneurs, as you awaken, as you do the work, the meditations and the learning, the self-reflection, the shadow works, or going through plant medicines, you kind of have maybe the wrong assumption that, you know what, I'm gonna be more zen, I'm gonna get less triggered. But very often what I see is that you continue to get triggered. And I know that my wife says to me, like, haven't you been meditating? Well, why are you like getting triggered? But from what you just explained, like this is my interpretation of it. It's you got a tribe that constantly challenge your awakening, your awareness beyond the emotional, physical, and the mental. So it's almost like as you get more conscious, they throw the emotion at your emotion comes out faster, or maybe from another blind spot to see whether you can catch it. And the better you are, the faster they throw the ball at you to keep upping your game, upping your awareness. But if you become aware of the triggers or the emotion as it arises, once you become aware and there's distance between it, you're not consumed by it, you're not indulging in it, then suddenly that just fades away.
You have it absolutely correct. What life will do, whether it's from a tribe like what I was living with, or whether it's just from life itself, it's very much like a video game. The higher the level that you achieve, the faster things come at you. And so you must continually up your game. And as you continuously up your game, the game continuously gets stronger and larger until eventually you anticipate that the game is going to throw something at you. And when you are able to then know what the game is going to throw at you before it even throws it at you, that's when you're able to just say, okay, we'll deal with that. We're moving forward. We'll deal with that. We're moving forward. We'll deal with that. We're moving forward continuously. This is the nature of physical life. Physical life is what is called a binary universe, meaning that it is made up of equal and opposites at all times. And what holds this physical binary universe together is tension, pressure, stress, and friction. The four principles, the four qualities of the physical universe. You know, what holds water together, that makes it water, is what's called surface tension. It's what allows water to not be just a bunch of dust. It keeps it together so that it is that liquidity, that fluidity, and that's a tension. And consequently, all of the water in our body, 70% water, is being held together by a tension. So if we don't want to be tense, then we have to be non-physical. But as long as we're in the physical, we have to feel that tension. What are you going to use it for? You can use it as a fuel, or you can use it as a disruption. And that's why the choice is yours. When the disruption is thrown at you, turn it into fuel. Because all it is, you use the word triggered. All that triggers us is the imbalances of tension, pressure, stress, and friction. And once we learn to navigate that, now it's no longer going to trigger us. Now it's going to fuel us. Now it's going to provide us with a capacity to move forward.
Quoting from the book, you also mentioned misfortune is only equal to the amount of power you've given away and the amount of power you will need to in order to fulfill your destiny.
Misfortune is equal to the powers that you have given away. Can you imagine how much power we give away when we think we have to study in order to understand a subject? Because what is study? Study is called learning. Learning is recognizing information. Think about the word recognize. Recognize, to know it again. When you learn something, you have that aha moment. All of a sudden, you have the realization, oh, that's it. What you're doing is you're recognizing what you already know, but we're ignoring. That's why it's called ignorance. You were ignoring what you already knew until you did it so many times that you agreed within yourself that you were going to know it again. You were going to recognize it or recognize it. And in that recognition, now you've learned it. Why not just stop the struggle and just know that you know already? Little children run around, you tell them something, you go, I know that. And it's quite offensive and insulting to most adults because they think, well, that little kid is rude, you know? But that little kid is actually telling the truth.
So I shouldn't be proving my kids wrong when they say that to me.
Yeah, don't prove them wrong, because the bottom line is that every human being is born in an enlightened state. They have to learn to be in a diminished state. The only difference between my upbringing and others people's upbringing was that my upbringing did not try to diminish my enlightenment. It simply encouraged it.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you about parenting advice later on, but I just want to touch on another thing that was a major wowzer moment for me. When you had the near-death experiences, you had spirits or guides that came and visit you. And then later on, when you visited a tribe, you actually met some of these people in the physical form. And part of the book said death took you outside of time. Without the restriction of time, you're able to be in any time. So part of what I started to learn in only a couple of years ago is this whole 3D, 4D, 5D. And I keep saying, like, how come nobody taught this in university, in primary school,
Yes. Woohoo!
And then I had to look up in the law of one, they talk about density as 3D, 4D, 5D, and some talk about dimensions and different meaning, different things. Who came up with it? And all this research, but nobody taught it. It's like what I'm learning from your book is, wow, you actually travel outside of time and it's beyond the 3D. And so can you explain a bit more? Like, I guess death in your sleeping dream, like my understanding, that's like the 4D, but whether you get technical or not, like what is this outside of time? What is the beyond 3D?
Okay, you imagine this. I'm going to get a piece of demonstration here. So my father, in addition to being a yogi, was an artist, and this was his artist's. You can see all the paint on it.
It's beautiful.
And you would put this cork end against the canvas, and you would be able to lay your arm across it to steady your arm so that your hand wouldn't, would be very, very steady. So I use this as an example. Einstein, in his theory of relativity, explained time as space traveling through a point of awareness, a point of observation. So say that my two fingers are the point of observation, and this is space. And I'm noticing Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and so on. And this here has already passed through my point of observation. And so we call it the past. This here has not yet passed through my point of observation. It will, but it hasn't yet. And we call that the future. But if you look at it not from the point of observation, which is for time is the fourth dimension. So the point of observation is the fourth dimension viewing the third dimension as it passes through it. If you step outside of that third and fourth dimension, you're in the fifth dimension, which recognizes that the past still exists. The future already exists. All I have to do is step out into the fifth dimension, and I can know what was, and I can know what is to be. But when I know what is to be, I notice that it's not just a single line, it's a multiple line, countless lines, and that my choices are choosing which one of the lines am I going to have passing through my point of observation. Now you're getting into the real factor of the human being has free will, because the free will is the choices of what is the future that I want to pass through my point of perception. And I can choose fairly unlimited. It is limited by the amount of awareness and observation that I have allowed myself to view with, because I could view certain things and go, no, I can't do that, or no, I can't have that, or no, this and no, that. So that's going to reduce my choices. But what if my choices are that I have unlimited capacity, and therefore I can live in that fifth dimensional space and make really, really conscious choices and manifest them? I mean, look at the word manifest. The word mana, as I said earlier, means mind, and fest means festival. Manifestation is simply having a festival in your mana. In other words, you're having a celebration of the mind. When you celebrate that you can achieve something, you can achieve it.
So in some of the spiritual teachings, like the secret law of attraction, it's almost like, hey, it's our job is it to transcend beyond the 3D, 4D, 5D so we can manifest what we want? Because I feel like we have that ability, but that's still a very 3D way of looking at your life and your purpose, which nothing wrong with that. It is what it is. But I feel that it's almost like it's over-popularized because it's something that's easily marketable. If someone wants to sell a product that causes an event, hey, I'll teach you how to manifest and in a way control your life the way that your ego self wants. So although that is ability, it's probably is just, I'm sensing that it's just part of what we can do or supposed to do.
It's only the beginning. It's only the beginning, because first of all, you've got to meet your needs with ease. Second of all, you've got to meet your family's needs with ease. Third of all, you've got to meet your community's needs with ease. And once you start to teach people how to meet their basic needs with ease, then we can get down to the real business, which is not accumulating more, but it is how do we enable to do what we need to do in life with the greatest amount of ease, joy, knowing, and freedom. Because life that can be lived with an ease is not diseased. It's healthy. Life that can be lived in joy is not competitive, is not combative, is not creating these false angers of wars and aggressions and I want what you have and taking away people's lands, and it's ridiculous. And life that is lived in ease and joy is a life that's lived in knowing. So everybody knows. We don't have to teach people. We all know. Just teach them to know. And then they can know everything. And then you have freedom. And in that freedom, what we'll end up doing is we'll end up creating more art. We'll end up creating more music. We'll end up, yes, we will be able to walk on water. We will be able to fly through the air. We will be able to do all of these things. We will stop polluting. We will stop raising animals and slaughtering them. We will start living in the way that the animal lives, and that is to feed off the plant world, just like the breath. And the way the plant world lives is to feed off the animal world, just like the breath. And all of a sudden there becomes this incredible equilibrium and an incredible balance. What's causing the majority of the challenge in today's world is that there is no ease, there is tremendous dis-ease, there is very little joy, there's tremendous competition and greed and conflict. there is no knowing, there's tremendous ignorance, and there's definitely very little freedom, except for a very few people who have a bit of financial freedom. But even those who have a bit of financial freedom are still driven to achieve more, while sprinkling a little bit of charity around the world. Yeah?
Yeah.
It's such a broken system.
And I recall you saying this is like the dusk before the dawn, right?
Yeah.
Nice. So 2 weeks before, 2 years ago, 2 weeks before school was about to start, a thought downloaded to me to say, Gary, why don't you homeschool the kids? And my personality at the time and my characteristic is not like, hey, I love spending time with the kids. And like, in fact, I'm the extreme opposite. I don't have the patience. Like 2 minutes teaching them homework, I'm already getting fired up and frustrated. But then intuition came and I shared it with my wife. And Doreen says, what? What are you supposed to expect me to say? Like, you came with no research, no plan, and you expected me to say yes? What the? And I took that as she's my voice of truth. And so the universe says, okay, do a little bit more research. But she's also quite intuitive, I think. And she said, agree to it. So we started very structured. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, math, science, English, whatever. And then like I found that it just wasn't working. Something wasn't right. And I see some of the other kids that's practicing unschooling. It seems to be flourishing. Unschooling is basically you teach them nothing and just for them to just be. And if they want, you just trust that natural human have the desire to wanting to learn and grow. And there's some bright spots that I could find in a journey. But my wife, again, from the voice of God, is saying, hey, like they're falling behind. They're lazing around doing nothing. And the social pressure and the norm kind of kicked in. And so we kind of like found a bridge in between of the structure system and the unschooling and also incorporate some of the cosmic schooling, like the consciousness and how the world, in my eyes, that I see it works. I think the path for them, which you wrote in the book, the most important thing to everyone is raising the children to be truly awakened humans. And that's what I believe. I believe like my purpose is to help people remember who they truly are. And I teach the kids is when you become more conscious, everything becomes easier with ease. Like rather than you learn a certain skills, but then there's new things to learn and there's obstacles, there's challenges, emotional challenges and mental challenges, spiritual challenges. There's always going to be challenge. But when you become conscious, I feel like I'm just bumping against the wall and bumper cars and trial and errors. And where I'm listening to you, you're just downloading information and you've got all this wisdom. Like, is there a better way that we could teach our kids?
Yes. So many people are now learning that the way that we have been teaching for quite some time has been from a position of you have to study to learn. The way I was taught from a very young age is that you have to know that you know. And so what you have to teach a child is to discover from within itself what it already knows. It has access to everything. And whatever it needs, it has to go into that state of knowing that it knows, do a little bit of research, do a little bit of study to guide you into the vocabulary, to the structure. And then that the lens of that vocabulary and structure will put into perspective all of the raw data, all of that information that you're drawing in. And now, instead of just reading and learning what somebody else has discovered, you're actually experiencing the joy of discovering it for yourself. And that is more enjoyable than actually learning it from someone else. When you inspire your children to research, when you inspire your children to follow their investigative curiosity, this is truly the gift that you can teach them. Because then through their investigative curiosity, they will begin to build their vocabulary. They will begin to build their knowledge base. And as they build their knowledge base, they will begin to have new ideas. They will begin to formulate concepts. They will begin to construct their sense of, I use the word imagination, but I want to make it sound not like it's frivolous. Imagine solutions to situations that are causing either challenges in their own life or challenges in life itself. And when you ignite a child with that ability, now you've ignited a master. And that master will then proceed into the world and have a tool that can serve them throughout their lives. You know, in the Bible, there's the story of the fishermen, and they said, there's a line that comes from that chapter in the Bible that says, if you give a person a fish, they will eat a good meal. But if you teach them how to fish, they will never starve. And even though I'm vegan and I don't eat fish, it's a good story. It's a good metaphor, because if you apply that same story in many different ways, if you teach a child how to research, and think about the word research, to search again. It's so incredible. These words have this intrinsic etymology of what they actually mean. And then you create what are called responsible children. Well, what is a responsible children? A child that has the ability to respond. Responsibility is the ability to respond. And so a responsible child is a child that has the ability to respond to its circumstances. You teach a child the ability to respond to any circumstance, you're teaching them to be confident, confidence, faith. You're teaching them to walk through their life with faith, to navigate all of the situations that may arise, and to know that they know and know how to research so that they can gather the information to be applied to the circumstance. This is giving a child the ability to be successful regardless of their circumstance.
And Guru Singh, when you mention about research, are you referring to using Google for research, or going within or tapping into source for research, or all of the above?
All of the above. Eventually, you can just go into the inner space, but you need to have certain guideposts to develop that inner space. And those guideposts are through books, are through, obviously, Google is a research tool. Libraries are research tools. You read books, or you listen to books, you gain information. This information that you gain from books is structure. And in that structure, you learn how to navigate the wilderness of the inner landscape, that meditative landscape. Because if you just go into them, just get lost, and you may enjoy it for a while, but after a while it'll get boring because you don't know where the heck to go, and you don't know what you're doing, and you have no. So you want to be able to gather enough information out of your research so that you know how to develop the vision, how to develop the auditory, how to develop the feelings that will allow you to travel through time and space in a meaningful way, in a productive way, in a way that actually brings you answers rather than just entertains you. Not to put down entertainment. I love to go into an entertaining meditation, but I also love to go into a meditation for a specific purpose, and to disassemble and reassemble the future so that I can then walk into it already assembled in a way that I don't have to struggle and put everything on my back, and cause it to happen through great effort,
Wow, thank you.
Let me just mention one thing. All of the theories of how they built Stonehenge and how they built the pyramids in Egypt and the pyramids in three-dimensional stories of concept that is telling people how they would do it if they were trying to do it today. But those pyramids and those stone structures were levitated into place because people had the ability in that, what we would call in today's language, that superpower of levitation. You look at Machu Picchu. and the stones that are cut, that even in today's world would require a laser to make them that perfect. Those stones were cut by truly magical terms, whether it was a physical laser or a cosmic laser channeled through a meditative mind. Regardless, I'm not going to argue that. But those things are not ancient people with stone hammers carving these things, struggling with, ropes made out of crap, pulling them over sand with logs rolling. That's a nonsensical way of describing it. And so these powers that we can develop could give us an entirely civilization. I mean, they didn't just build those, as a tomb for the pharaoh. They built them as an instrument that was bringing in cosmic rays. I mean, they have tested the angles of those pyramids and they have found them to be flawless. Big magic.
Yeah. I remember in the Law of One, they talked about, if these are thought forms that you created the pyramid, why don't you make it more polished and this and that? They said, we didn't want you to marvel at that as some outside creation. That wasn't the whole purpose. We just wanted to do its job.
Yeah, exactly. How beautiful is that, huh?
So reading a book is the first time I ever heard of like rites of passage and vision quest. Can you talk a bit more about, like, I know various indigenous tradition, they got something equivalent. What is the rite of passage? And in the modern way, in the modern world, in industrialized age, information age, do you see certain practices that we go through? Is it the midlife crisis? Is it like the education system? Is there something equivalent of a modern day rite of passage that people go through?
Well, I'll use one of your phrases, which is midlife crisis. People go through a midlife crisis because they never went through a rite of passage. There are different sections of life, and each one of those sections of life, meaning from birth to 3 years old, from 3 years old to 7, from 7 to 12, from 12 to 18, from 18 to 25, from 25 to 50, from 50 to 75, like that. And each one of those, psychologists, doctors have all described the different kinds of developmental circumstances that occur in various periods of your life. The period of life that was used for rite of passage in tradition, through the vision quest, in tradition, rite of passage and vision quest is the same, is the equivalency, was this period of time between the time is from 12 to 18 years old. The body is developing certain glands and organs which are secreting peptides, hormones, proteins, and lipids into the system, causing it to become very disrupted and very growth oriented. It works with what in spirituality and metaphysics is called the second chakra. And the second chakra is all about approval, from the interior world of self-approval and the exterior world of being approved of. And so instead of putting a child between the ages of 12 and 18 out into the world and having them being bombarded by approval and disapproval and being completely disrupted by it, the communities, mainly the indigenous communities, would work with a rite of passage in that time to prove to the child that they don't have to be approved of. They just have to prove to themselves that they are themselves. And so what they would do is they would, as in my instance, they would put you through various challenges that were insurmountable, that in some instances were life and death.
You're literally getting buried alive.
Exactly. And being put into the inner caves, in the Taquatsi, in the pitch black, and having to find your way out. And it was these kinds of rites of passage. They would send a child out into the desert. You know, Jesus, 40 days in the desert. Muhammad, 40 days in the desert. The Buddha, 40 days under the Bodhi tree. You know, all of these were just the stories of their vision quest. That's all these were. And so what those circumstances do to a child, boy or girl, is they prove to themselves that they have everything that they need inside themselves. That when everything seems like it's going to collapse around them, that if they become self-reliant, they will find a way through. And that is the greatest gift that you can teach someone. If you can teach someone that if they are under the greatest amount of pressure and that they can find within themselves the power to see the steps that they need to take to make it through that challenge, you've just given a child the ability to become a true adult. And that's what I was gifted when I was in Mexico, in the way back of Mexico, within that tribe community. And that's what many indigenous communities, prior to the corruption, I mean, the British corrupted the Aborigines with alcohol. The Americans corrupted the Native Americans with alcohol. You know, so many of the indigenous people have been corrupted.
Do you ever put your kids through the rite of passage?
Yeah, our two children are very highly schooled in the ability to self-rely.
Can you give me some examples?
Yes, we sent them to school in India. And within that time, they would learn to rely on themselves because they didn't have us around. But also, we would teach them at a very young age to meditate. And we would teach them they would come out of their meditation and they would tell us what they experienced. And then we would work with them with each one of their descriptions as to how they can use that, how to revisit that experience. Because meditation is a series of building blocks. It's very much like in the three-dimensional world 400-500 years ago, when the great explorers, or even 1.5 million years ago, when the migrations were coming out of Africa. You know, they would go so far, like they would send a scout ahead, and then the scout would come back and say, well, this is the best way to go. Then everybody would remember that this is the best way to go. And so we would train our children in their meditations so that they didn't just go off into the never land and just have like a great trip, as you would say in the world of substance, right? Oh, I was really tripping out, Well, okay, but did you learn how to go into a particular arena to learn a particular skill set so that you could have that rite of passage and you could bring back that talent and then use it in your life? So we trained our children through very specific meditative practices, how to navigate the world of 3 and 4 dimensions by using the world of the 5th dimension.
Holy moly, I'm speechless. I am literally inspired and in awe. You've just expanded my ceiling on what can be taught. And I was just reading or listening to the book, The Art of Dreaming. And
beautiful.
Yeah, because I've been doing lucid dreaming for maybe a few months now, but then
excellent.
Just like how little do I know? Because it says, look at your hand, look at the details of the dreams. I couldn't find any details, but it's another realm to explore. And so with your kids, like for me, I've used gene keys, numerology, and some of, I guess, clairvoyance and my own intuition to try to work out with my 3 kids, what is each one of the unique path, or why are they here to learn, what they're here to experience, what they're here to fulfill. Do you kind of do that for your kids, or it doesn't matter? Like we raise them the same way?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because that is, to use that word again, that is the responsibility. That is the ability to respond as a parent. Because if you can give your children good advice, not control them, but give them good advice, they can take in that advice just like they take in breakfast, lunch, dinner. becomes nourishment. And with that nourishment of good advice, they can grow into a future that is filled not only with opportunity, but with the courage to enter an opportunity and to fulfill a particular talent or ability, or to discover a particular talent or ability. You know, so much of the world of human beings is basically just a scrap heap, a garbage dump of unused opportunities and unused abilities. You know, you think about the pollution in the world. Well, plastic bottles, great pollution. Throwaway clothing, great pollution. You know, fields and fields and mountains and mounds of these discarded things that could be used. And that's the nature of human beings, is that our world is filled with these garbage dumps of discarded opportunities and unfulfilled dreams and unfulfilled talents and skill sets. And by the way, the brain in the head, there's 3 brains in the body: the gut brain, the heart brain, and the head brain. Head brain has been most developed. Now we have to really develop the gut and the heart to have that clairsentience and clairaudience to align with our clairvoyance. However, what I'm pointing out here is that the brain in the head is a brain that navigates in 2 dimensions: right, wrong, good, bad, yes, no. And it learns right, wrong, good, bad, yes, no. And it holds on to that memory so that it can navigate that. And what we learn in our rite of passage, what we learn in our vision quest, in a more modern day version of this, is how do we construct the future that we want to then step into? How do we fulfill the talents that we have been given in this life? And how do we motivate our talents to reveal not only their purpose, but our own life's purpose? And then suddenly you have given birth, not just in the initial stages of physical birth, but now in an older age, like in the teenage years or in the pre-teenage years, you've given birth on an emotional and a mental basis to that which the child can then use. So then they can use their physical body, their emotional body, and their mental body to achieve their spiritual purpose, which may have something really important to give to the physical world, the emotional world, and the mental world. It's not just a spiritual purpose, but it's a purpose that can have great benefit to so much of life itself.
Wow. So normally for these podcasts, I don't write questions, but because there's so many things I wanted to ask specifically about the book, I actually written some questions. But amongst them, I actually wrote down what are plants, what is air, what is water, which you pretty much you answered. You preemptively answered what these things are, even though they are out of the blue type of questions. But I'm going to ask a bit more about the plants. What are plants? And are all plants equal? Because obviously there's some plant teachers, especially in Mexico and different places. There's a lot of different plant teachers. And what's your interpretation? What are plants? Are they conscious beings? Are they helping us? What's your interpretation of plants? And are all plants equal?
Yeah, all life is equal and everything is alive. And when we break off from the Paramatma into an Atma, Atma means a soul particle. Paramatma means the total soul. It's a hologram. So every part of the total is equal to the total. And so when the part has one desire, when it breaks off from the total, the Atma breaks off from Paramatma. The soul particle breaks off from the total. Its one desire is to reunite with the total. That's just the nature of nature. And as evolution has created, there are all these pathways that lead back to the total. And the total is that merging with infinity, that complete and total awakening, right? And it takes millions of lifetimes. There's some cultures that talk about the number 8.4 million lifetimes from that first separation from the wholeness to the regaining of the ability to go back into the wholeness. Because the moment there's a separation, that separation forms a consciousness. And the consciousness is ignited in the awareness of I am separate. And that's what causes that individual consciousness to be born. Individual consciousness is born from I am, because that I am is the separation of the total, in which there is no I, there is no self, there is nothing. There is just a complete merger. And so that I am begins its journey through incarnations in the mineral world. And that is to be the life of a stone, the life of metal, the life of mineral crystal, the life of any of the mineral incarnations. And then from that world, it goes into the plant world. And in each one of these incarnations, there's a lesson to be learned, a series of lessons to be learned. So every one of our mineral incarnations, we learn things like steadiness, conductivity. All our metallic incarnations, we learned conductivity, connection. All of our crystal and gemstone incarnations, we learned how to be translucent and transparent, right? And how to be stable. And then we go into the plant world and we learn how to grow how to dig our roots deep in the ground and grow to the light and stand tall. You know, we learned all of these things. And then we go from the plant world into the animal world through the capacity of the in-between world, which is the world of the fungi and the insects. We go through those incarnations with all of that world and all of that dreamscape. And then we come into the actual four-leggeds and the wing and the fins, and we go through incarnations and we take on the lives of many of these creatures. And then we ultimately come into the human form. And the human form is the most disrupted of any of them, because it is not controlled by instinct, it's controlled by the free will. But until the incarnations upon incarnations upon incarnations develop the ability to formulate that free will into a structure that can then cause it to be focused, it's just running about willy-nilly. It's just running all over the darn place, you know? I mean, it's not even as trained as a good lion or elephant or even a palm tree. You know, palm tree has more training than these crazy idiot human beings that are just running all over the place, right? And then you get to a place in your consciousness like yourself where you recognize that, and it comes to you and it keeps coming to you in these kinds of stimulated inspirational moments, that, oh my goodness, I have, oh my goodness, this, and oh my goodness, that. And that's when you really start applying yourself to do the finishing touches of the work of truly being that humane human. And so, in answer to your question about plant life, they are most incredible guiding creatures. And so are the stones, the metals. They're some of our great guiding creatures. And we should treat all life as if it is as precious as our own life. In that way, we learn what their life is about and what their life is fulfilled through. You know, some people, they'll walk along a beach and they'll see all of the stones on the beach. If it's not a sandy beach, maybe it's a beach with rocks and stones on it. I never pick up those rocks and stones because they're sitting with their brothers and sisters there. And they have been sitting with their brothers and sisters for ages and ages and ages. And you pick them up and you throw them out in the water, or you do something like that. That is like, oh my God, you just broke up a family.
Oh, geez. I know that what my shaman taught me as I started venturing with the plant medicine. And then there's temptations, or not temptation, but almost like a first, maybe I should try this other medicine and this other plant teaches. And then she just said, you know what, Gary, what you kind of mentioned, all paths lead to Rome. They all lead to the same place, just as plant medicine and meditation and breath work, yoga, Tai Chi, like, they all lead to consciousness. And some people may go through different paths, but sometimes she said that when you get too fascinated and consumed with trying out the different paths, you can get even more lost rather than just sticking to one pathway.
Do you remember Tony's word for that?
No?
Dabbler.
Yeah, dabblers. Yes. But at the same time, I guess I also find that part of my first, because Tony also uses it on the other extreme, is mastery. Part of my job is to be the master dabbler, so that I get at least a taste of all, not master dabbler, but almost like being a librarian, may not have read every single book, but at least know a little bit to point people, okay, this is, if you were to go to this path, this is kind of what it's like. But yeah, like you made it really simple to understand that the purpose of plants and the minerals kingdoms and everything, how it all falls in place. And I love it. So going back to what you feel like is your purpose, that you're spending quite a bit of time to teach about the 3D world, can you go a bit more deeper so that our audience can learn on the mastery that you're offering? And if they wanted to pursue after this podcast to further undertake some type of learning from you, obviously there's the book Buried Treasures, and there's the website gurusingh.com. And I know that you share quite a bit on your podcast, on your Instagram, on Facebook, different social media platform. What can people expect? What can people learn? And how do they go about getting access to it?
Well, we have just launched a global university online with a 200-hour training, and it starts in November, and we have another one that's being registered now for March. And in that, I will take people through 22 modules plus another encyclopedia of information of how it is that you can move from a state of wanting to awaken into an awakened state. And it's called Kundalini University. You can find it online at kundaliniuniversity.com.
Anyone can participate?
Anyone can participate. And it requires no prerequisite, just your desire. And it's accomplished through 16 weeks with hundreds of videos, PDFs, recordings, and live sessions on Zoom. And what we end up with is a real sense. What we will deliver is a real sense of how each person's purpose, though different, is also stimulated with the same fuel. It's like digestion. 3 people can eat at a restaurant and they're all eating a different item off the menu. But inside the body, all of those items off the menu are broken down into the exact same component parts. And that's how the body then uses them. And this is the way we are teaching, that whatever you consume from whatever it is that we're teaching, your spiritual body, your mental body, your emotional body, and your physical body will consume this information and break it down into the usable parts. And because I've been doing this, I've been teaching for over 50 years, I know what it is that a person is going to require at each stage of their development in order for them to achieve that fulfillment and ultimately that awakening that we were talking about earlier, to really awaken yourself into that state of sort of more conscious curiosity so that you can discover more, because we're never done discovering. And so that's something that they can do. I have many books. You can get them all through online booksellers, Amazon, etc. I've got a lot of music out there. I'm a musician. I do a lot of CDs. You can find those out there. And you can find this all at gurusingh.com. And people like yourself and myself, what we are achieving here is we are igniting people's curiosity so that they become not only curious about what's outside themselves, but as you know, and as you've experienced, they become deeply curious about what's inside themselves.
What will you say to someone that's looking, oh, this sounds interesting, but I'm dealing with business crisis with COVID right now, or maybe like relationship issues, health issues. I'm too busy to do this spiritual stuff. What would you say to someone that's going through that right now?
It's like a person that's learned tennis by themselves. They've self-taught. And they would say to a professional tennis teacher, "Now I'm too busy playing tennis. I can't unlearn the way I do it in order to relearn the way it's much easier to do it." I would say to that person, take the time out and start unlearning, like what you were talking about with your children. Start unlearning the ways that you have been doing things so that you can relearn the way things are much easier to be done. And then once you've learned the way things are much easier to be done, that's when you will start doing them with the greater ease and the greater efficiency and achieving a greater outcome.
Mm. And for the person that, hey, things are going pretty well, I'm pretty happy, there's no problems, why should they head over to the Kundalini University?
Because everyone has a mountain they want to climb. Having no problems is meaning that you're not in some kind of a hole that you need to get yourself out of. Having no problems is a good time to start climbing mountains. And the mountains of your life, not the getting out of holes of your life, the mountains of your life are those opportunities that are even beyond having no problems.
Great. I love it. And I believe that if you listening to this, if you came across this course and if it sings to your heart, that's no mistake. It didn't just happen randomly. You called to be here. And Guru Singh accumulates from a non-religious place, like all this spiritual wisdom from many different places, from the Bible to Buddha, all sort of places, from shamanism and many indigenous culture to the latest technology using Zoom, binaural beats. I've listened to some of your meditation, extremely powerful. So you are in for a treat. I'm definitely in and really looking forward to doing the course and meeting some of you guys there. So Guru Singh, any last word of wisdom in this very interesting time that a lot of us are heading towards?
I would say that to all of the people out there, you are blessed to know that Gary exists, because all the time that I have known Gary, he has been the kind of person that not only is successful at what he does, but his greatest passion is about helping others become as good as they can become at what they do. And I've ate meals with him on trips that we've done together. I've been in restaurants. I've been in all kinds of situations with Gary. Gary always wants everybody to be getting the most out of each moment. And so, as a parting comment, I would just say you are very fortunate to know Gary, but you were attracted to Gary because you have that inside yourself as well. You have that same desire and ability to share with others and to help others and to make others as good as they can possibly be, not only yourself, but the ones around you. And so congratulations, and I respect you, and I'm so grateful that you have found Gary and that Gary and I could get together and have a chat with you today.
Thank you so much, Guru Singh, for your generosity and your time, your kindness, your wealth of wisdom. Man, have this come at an opportune time for all of our listener and myself and my family. So grateful. So
God
grateful.
bless you.
Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste.